Edgewood University. A paranormal romance written by Tanya Grice. Year 1. Episode 2. Strange World. Sometimes things may not always be as they seem. If you look deeper, you can see the magic within, and if you're lucky, you can harness it. You can open your eyes now, Miss Layla, said the driver. Slowly, Layla moved her arm and her eyes widened, seeing the beautiful countryside. She pressed her face against the glass and couldn't believe her eyes. Welcome, Edgewood! The sky was clear and bright blue, and the sun shone brightly, making the land warm and inviting. The town was full of smiling and cheery people walking down the street and stopping in the little shops. Bright green trees with bright yellow and blue flowers decorated the street corners, and the cobblestone roads were clean and trash-free. The town was small, cozy, and beautiful, and Layla felt something rush through her veins. She ignored it, memorized by the gorgeous sight, and the driver chuckled. "I told you were going to like this place," he said as they turned on a long red gravel path lined with rose bushes and tall, leafy green oak trees. Layla smiled, nodding, and she looked at the driver oddly. "How is this possible? Didn't we just get on the highway?" The driver snickered as he pulled up to a large black and reddish brick castle-looking building, and Layla stared. The place was huge and inviting. "I think the headmistress should explain everything to you. What do I know? I'm just the driver." She looked at the man in the mirror and thought she saw his eyes shimmer. She shook her head and blinked. "Come on," he said cheerfully as he stopped the car and got out. He opened the door, and Layla slid out, looking at the enormous building and swallowing hard. "Wow, this place is beautiful. This isn't a school. This is a whole nother world," she breathed. The driver pulled her bags from the trunk and set them beside her. "You think that's great? Wait till you see the inside," he said, and she grinned. "So, young, beautiful one, this is where we part ways. Here is your map. You will be either meeting with Bailey or Cassidy in the Dragon Square," he said, handing her an old folded piece of parchment paper, and she looked at him oddly. "Good luck, and don't overthink. You'll be great," he said, walked toward the car, and waved. Layla watched the man get in the car and drive away, and the vehicle disappeared. She looked at the school, picked up her bags, and sucked in a breath. She thought about what the driver said and snorted. "Wait, did he say Dragon Square?" she asked herself and shook her head. "This place is strange," she sighed, heading inside the school. Layla made her way to the square, and her eyes widened, looking around. She was surprised by how big the place was, and the many students walking around and looking at maps like hers. The Dragon Square was an outside area in the center of the school with light brown sandy walkways separated by tiny reddish cobblestone walls. In the center of the garden was a beautiful dragon fountain, with water coming from its mouth and many different dragonstone statues. The colors around the school seemed unreal and more vibrant than anything she had ever seen. She thought she saw a sparkling bug dive into the fountain, shook her head, and looked again. The shiny bug seemed to have disappeared, but the fountain shimmered, making her tilt her head. Did the school use holographs to make everything look so magical? Was this place a joke, or was it even real? Layla noticed many dragon statues facing the fountain and realized how the square got its name. "Oh, I get it. The Dragon Square." She laughed. She looked at the map in the four corners of the square. Suddenly, she felt another rush through her veins, and the map burst into flames. She gasped, dropping the map, and she noticed the fire around her hand. She cried as she waved her hand, and the flames disappeared. Layla looked her hand over and blew a breath, seeing she was unscathed. "What in the world?" she breathed, looking around and saw no one seemed to notice. She shook her head and saw a blonde-haired girl walking toward her. "So, you're a fire fairy?" she asked, and Layla looked at her oddly. "What?" The girl giggled and sighed. "You know, a fire fairy. They control fire magic," said the girl, and Layla shook her head. "I have no idea what you're talking about." The girl looked at her with bright blue eyes and pressed her lips together. "You're at the Edgewood Academy, a place where the supernatural and paranormal kids come to learn about their magic. You didn't know this was that type of school?" she asked, tilting her head. Layla sighed and shook her head, confused. "Well, just so you know, I'm not a fairy. I'm a banshee," said the girl, waving to other students, and Layla's eyebrows rose. She stared at the girl like she had 6 heads and cleared her throat. Did her parents really send her to a place for the mentally insane? Why would they do that? Wait, Layla, get a hold of yourself. This isn't real. This was a dream. It had to be. She straightened, adjusted the bag on her shoulder, and gave the girl a thoughtful look. Okay. I can definitely see this place isn't for me, so I think I'm going to find who's in charge and head home. She breathed, backing away. The girl looked at her oddly, and a few students turned their heads. Layla, is that you? Just a familiar voice, and Layla gasped, spinning around. The woman who she thought she would never see again stood in the courtyard and gave her a thoughtful look. Her hair was the same color as it was before, black as satin, and her almond eyes were misted with tears. She sighed and glanced at Cassidy. Why didn't anyone send you to my office? Cassidy shook her head and shrugged. Layla stared, and tears rolled down her cheeks. Mrs. Tate? She exclaimed, dropping her bags and hugging the woman. Maya smiled, hugging her back, wiping a tear from her cheek. I've missed you, Maya, Layla whispered. I've missed you so much, Lay, Maya said and pulled back. She rubbed the girl's shoulders, sniffed, and smiled. Come with me. We have much to catch up on, she said, and Layla grinned, nodding and wiping her face on her sleeve. Maya looked at the blonde-haired girl, and the girl smiled. Cassidy, why don't you and Bailey get the suite ready? Layla will be joining you soon. Cassidy nodded, grinned at Layla, and walked away. Layla looked at the smooth, brown granite walls and the odd-looking stone statues as Maya led her through the school. A few male students looked at her, gave her dashing smiles, and the last bit his lower lip, looking her up and down. Layla scoffed, and Maya snickered. The boys looked at the headmistress, straightened, and hurried down the hall in the opposite direction. Layla looked at her best friend's mother and laughed, and Maya put her arm around her shoulders. The headmistress led her into a large, decorated office with books lining the walls, glass and wooden cabinets holding antiques and trinkets, and an enormous dark oak desk and 2 chairs in the back of the room. Big blue, heavy drapes covered the windows with yellow sashes holding them open, and the light made the room look like it had been there for centuries. Wow, your office is gorgeous, said Layla, looking around, and Maya smiled. She walked to her desk and pulled out 2 wrapped red candy discs. She held one up, and Layla blew a breath and grinned. How have you been? I've missed having you around, she said, handing her the candy. Layla popped it in her mouth and sighed. When Mrs. Tate knew she had a bad day, she would steal her away from Tyler, pull out a bag of red candy discs, and sit on the porch while Layla told her what was bothering her. Honestly incomplete. Lost. Like a piece of my heart is missing. I miss Tyler so much. He was such a big part of my life. She breathed. Maya sighed and felt ashamed. She took them away from her and made her think she would never see them again, but they were from 2 different worlds until she was bitten. You know, I thought I went crazy. The night of the attack. Layla snorted, and Maya looked at her oddly. What do you mean, sweetheart? Well, I overheard the doctors talking about Tyler before I passed out. They said he came in with me with his shirt torn to shreds and not a scratch on him, but my parents told me what really happened, she said, looking at the floor and letting tears fall. Maya sighed heavily and gave Layla an apologetic look. Listen, honey, I am so sorry. We couldn't stay. I wish we could have, so you kids could have said a proper goodbye, but things didn't work out like that, she said, and Layla looked at her, creasing her brow. What? How could I have said goodbye to Tyler? My parents said he died at the scene. The bear that attacked us killed him, she said, and Maya shook her head. No, dear. We were forced to move because of what happened. Maya felt foolish for forgetting Celine told Layla on the day. She woke up that Tyler had died the night of the attack and sighed. Layla, she said, looked at the girl, and her eyes widened. Layla felt a powerful surge of energy rush through her body, making her more confused, and anger bubbled to the surface. Why did my parents tell me your son died? Why didn't anyone call me after I recovered? Why didn't anyone tell me the truth? Another rush of power coursed through her veins, and Maya watched her eyes shimmer and begin to glow red and orange like fire. She raised her hand slowly and gave Layla a soft look. Lay, honey, just breathe. Calm yourself. instructed Maya, and Layla sneered as her arms engulfed in flames. Maya swallowed hard and hoped someone would come through the door. "Sweetheart, you need to calm down," she said calmly, and Layla growled. "How could you leave me? How could you make me believe my best friend was dead?" She snarled. Maya blew a breath, straightened, and made her eyes glow yellow. Layla stared at her, and the flames dimmed. "We had no choice. We are different, just like you, but we have to answer to a council. You will meet them soon enough, and you too will have to follow their orders." The fire disappeared, and Layla's eyes faded to green. She thought momentarily and believed that this was all a dream. Maybe she was in a coma and hadn't woke up yet. She dreamed she did, and now her imagination ran wild. She looked at Maya and raised an eyebrow. "What are you?" Maya's eyes faded, and she lowered her arms. "Her family is werewolves. We had to leave because you were bitten by one of our own, but he wasn't an alpha. You shouldn't have been affected by his bite, but when your mother called and explained your behavior, I knew you were changing," she explained, and Layla shook her head. "So wait, say I'm buying into all the supernatural stuff? You said a werewolf bit me, so shouldn't I be turning into a werewolf? That girl called me a fire fairy." Maya snickered and folded her hands. "I understand your lack of belief. You grew up a mundane and were bitten. That makes you a hybrid." "Hybrid?" She scoffed, and Maya nodded. "That's a name for a fucking car." Maya snorted and smacked Layla across her knuckles with a folding fan. Layla looked at her with wide eyes. She snatched the fan from the woman's hands and hit her arm. "Did you just smack me with a doily fan?" she asked, and Maya smirked. Layla swatted her with the flat object several times, and she and Maya laughed. Maya smiled, took her fan, and pushed Layla's hair behind her shoulders. "I really do miss having you around," she said, and Layla smiled. "Well, you got me for now, but this stuff is kind of cray-cray, if you know what I mean." Maya sighed and shook her head. "My family comes from a long line of werewolves, so naturally, Tyler was born a purebred and grew up knowing the supernatural world. But you grew up mundane, and we are the stuff of children's stories, like the beast in the woods." Layla nodded, trying to make sense of everything, but she couldn't. She was definitely dreaming and ready to wake up. She pinched herself hard in a sensitive spot and yelled. Maya looked at her oddly and touched her shoulder. "Are you all right?" "Yeah. I thought if I pinched myself, I would wake up," Layla grumbled, and Maya snickered. "You're not dreaming, dear. This is very much real." Layla sighed, biting her fingernail, and gave Maya a thoughtful look. "Does he know?" she asked, chewing on her cuticle. Maya pressed her lips together and shook her head. "I wanted to explain everything to you first, and I'm glad I did. This is a lot to process, but seeing a ghost from the past would have been a system overload. I know you already feel like you've lost your mind, so I wanted to soften the blow," she said, and Layla scoffed and gave her a knowing look. "Too late. Mommy number 2. She snorted. Maya smirked, and Layla laughed. "Don't be calling me that out in the hallways. I don't need the students to think you get any favoritism. But I'm the daughter you wished you had." Maya eyed her and laughed. "You got me." She breathed, and Layla grinned. Her smile faded, and she gave the woman an intrigued look. "So what am I? Can some werewolves shoot fire out of their hands or something?" she asked nervously, and Maya sighed, touching her face. She searched her eyes, noticed the red rim around the green, and looked at her seriously. "A creature that bit you? What color were its eyes?" she asked quickly, and Layla inhaled sharply. "What is that? What color was its eyes, baby?" she asked, searching her eyes, and Layla blinked. Red. They were red," said Layla. Maya thought momentarily, and she gasped. "You're not a werewolf or a fire fairy. Lay, you're a hellcat." Layla swallowed hard and only nodded. How could she believe any of this is real? Werewolves, fairies, hellcats. What's next? Vampires and nymphs. She shook her head, and Maya led her to a chair. "This is all a little ridiculous, isn't it?" she asked, holding her head. Maya pulled a flask from her dress pocket and handed it to her. "Take a sip. It's strong wolf ale," she said, and Layla snorted, shrugged, and took a drink. The burn rushed through her body, making her eyes glow, and she inhaled a deep breath. She looked at Maya wide-eyed, and Maya saw her eyes shimmer. Better? She asked, and Layla nodded. Much. I mean, still a little pissed off at you, Peter and Tyler. But the fogginess is gone. I'm going to need a little time to process this, she said, and took another drink. Maya snatched the flask from her hand, and Layla felt the burn. If you're still angry, no more for you. Ancient creature or not, you have limits, Maya scolded, and she snorted. I'm 18, not ancient. Wait, I got some old thing in my body? She asked, and Maya laughed, shaking her head. We will get more into that later, she said, and Layla sighed. I feel like I've entered the loony bin. I guess we're all Looney Tunes then, said Maya, walking toward her desk. I agree. All right. Let's get you and your things to your room so you can settle in, said Maya. Layla felt a buzz and nodded. Sure. Damn it. Why did you let me drink so much? She teased, and Maya laughed. I did no such thing. Now get moving. I will have my staff carry you and your things to your room. Your staff? Layla slurred and shook her head. This is so your fault, she teased, and Maya laughed. My fault? Suddenly, the office door swung open, and Maya and Layla looked. Knowing this would turn bad, Maya sighed, and Layla's eyes widened.